Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Speaker Stories. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Jeff May, who will be our next speaker for the RMS SEPM Luncheon Series. And on December 20th at the Rock Bottom Brewery in downtown Denver at 11:30, Jeff's going to take us through the application of sedimentology and sequence stratigraphy to correlation challenges in the Wall Creek and Turner sandstones in the Powder River Basin. You can find out more about that talk at rmssepm.org. We're in person and via Zoom as well, if you wanted to join on the web. Just a little bit more about Jeff's background. He received his bachelor's in geology from Earlham College, his master's in geology from Duke University, and PhD in geology from Rice University. He's worked in the oil and gas industry for over 40 years as a research geologist with Marathon, as a geological and geophysical consultant with Enron Oil and Gas, and GeoQuest Reservoir Technologies, as an exploration geologist with DDD Energy and with EOG Resources beginning in 2001. He started there as the chief stratigrapher and then as the chief geologist until his retirement in 2011. He's now a geologic consultant and an affiliate faculty member in the Department of Geology and Geological Engineering at Colorado School of Mines. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Well, great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. So let's dive right in. So first, tell us a little bit about where you're from.
So I grew up on a dairy farm in northeastern Ohio. And
Oh, wow.
I was the first person in my family to go to a 4-year college program. My dad did 2 years after World War II. My grandfather did a couple years, but they were both farmers. So, but we would take vacations in the summer. We'd drive to different parts of the United States. And I always was wondering, why does this part of the United States look different than that part of the United States? And on the farm, you would tend to plow up a lot of rocks. And so I would look at the rocks, and then eventually I got into buying little rock collections, those boxes with the 9 little samples in them. So I had a collection of those. So I went off to college and decided I was either going to be a geologist or biologist. So that was my background.
So, okay, so geologist or a biologist, how did you choose, like what drove you into one direction or the other?
Oh, that's a great question. My freshman year, I took a bunch of geology classes, got mostly B's. My sophomore year, I took mostly biology classes and got all A's. And I was headstrong enough that I was not going to let geology beat me. So I decided I was going to become a geologist. I didn't like getting B's in college.
Yeah, that's great. That's an interesting motivation. And so that was at Earlham, or let me see here.
Right.
Earlham,
yeah, Earlham
College.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and where is that?
So it's a small Quaker affiliated college, liberal arts in Richmond, Indiana, right on the border with Ohio. I knew I wanted to go to liberal arts college, and there's plenty of great ones in Ohio, but I wanted to be far enough away that my parents wouldn't come visit me every weekend. So it was about 5 hours away from home, and it was really strong in sciences, one of the highest per capita PhDs in sciences of any liberal arts school in the United States.
Wow. And so did they have a graduate program in the geology department?
No, it's all undergraduate. They do have a master's in education program, but every other program is bachelor's.
Gotcha. And then from there you went on to Duke and then Rice. So what kind of drove your decision to go to Duke?
So one thing, I always liked being by the ocean. My parents, one of our vacations, a lot of time was going down to Hatteras, Cape Hatteras. And also when I was at Earlham, I took a marine biology off-campus program down in St. Petersburg area. So I liked snorkeling. I liked looking at what was going on in the ocean. So I thought I was going to be a marine geologist.
Okay.
And I had a friend who was at Duke, and they had a marine research lab as well as their own research vessel. And a friend of mine was working with Orrin Pilkey, the marine geologist and sedimentologist at Duke. So I went there thinking that's what I would end up doing.
Okay. And what did you end up doing?
So Orrin had done a sabbatical at Woods Hole, and he said to me, Jeff, I think I'm going to accept a position at Woods Hole. So I'm not sure that you want to, not sure that you want to tie yourself to my program because I might not be here next year. And then carbonate geologist Ron Perkins, who before Duke had been with Shell Oil Company at the Coral Gables Research Lab, asked me if I wanted to work with him on micro-boring organisms in carbonate sediments. So it was I was looking at algae, fungi in the marine environment that actually broke down carbonate particles. So it was kind of combining a little bit of the marine geology, but also sedimentology. Plus, it was fully paid. After my first year of being a TA, the second year it was all research associate. I didn't have to do any teaching, just do research and take classes. So I thought that was a pretty good deal.
Yeah, cool. Okay. And then you moved on to Rice. What did you work on for your PhD?
So at Rice, I talked to John Wormy, who ended up being my professor at Rice, and he took another student and me out to California and said, I've got 3 projects. One is to look at some of the carbonate, some of the Cretaceous shelf margin sediments in Baja. Some was looking at the Eocene shelf margin sediments in the San Diego region. And the third project was doing offshore box coring. So the other student and I flew out to California and looked at the rocks with John and actually went on a little research cruise with him before we accepted our postings at Rice. And I thought, man, looking at rocks along the beaches of San Diego and La Jolla, how can you beat that? Yeah. So that was the project I chose. The main focus was looking at a Eocene submarine canyon system along the beach north of La Jolla. So that's what I ended up working on. It was based on margin sedimentation.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, and so you made the transition shortly after that to industry, or did you have any time between?
Well, I'd had 3 summer internships with Gulf Oil, Marathon Oil, and who was the third one? I can't remember now. But I ended up taking a job with Marathon. I got offers. I came out at a great time. 1981 was a great time to finish grad school because there were jobs everywhere. The next year, the bottom fell out. There were no jobs. But I had job offers in Houston. I had job offers with Gulf up in Pittsburgh. I also worked for Amoco. That was my other summer job in Louisiana. I had job offers with Amoco, with Union Oil, but then we flew out to Denver, and they flew out my wife too. And this was after I'd already gone to Ponca City to look at Conoco. We ended up in Denver, drove up in the mountains, and my wife said, "You mean we could live here?" And I said, only if I get the job. Well, Marathon Oil, the research center, was down in Littleton, and they made me an offer that I couldn't refuse.
How did you survive the downturns of the 80s? What were some of the tools that you employed to get through it?
That's a great question. I think the main thing was to work, kind of network. I built up a good network at Marathon with a lot of the employees. One of my roles was in-house training, so it was all proprietary training. I did a lot of field courses. I also did a lot of special projects, so I was kind of an internal consultant. I worked a lot of both domestic and international projects. So I worked with our geologists in Lafayette, in Houston, in Bakersfield. I worked with some of our geologists in Cairo and in Jakarta. So I kind of built up, I guess, an expertise within the company that when they laid people off, they felt that I was doing a good enough job. So one other thing too was I early on tried to expand my expertise. I was kind of a traditional stratigrapher seismologist, but I started looking at seismic data, applying seismic stratigraphy to the seismic data, especially in the Gulf of Mexico and offshore California. And then when these newfangled things called seismic workstations came out, I was asked, do you think you could take what you're doing on seismic lines and apply it to these workstations on this cramped little screen, instead of these big, long seismic lines? And I said, well, I'll give it a go. So I started doing more seismic stratigraphy on workstations. That was a time when Marathon only had one in London, one seismic workstation in London. This was all landmark. One in Houston and one at the research center here in Littleton. So I kind of also broadened my expertise in what I was capable of doing within the company.
Right,
so,
right.
So it was two things: was make yourself useful, work lots of projects with people within the company, as well as expand. Yes, you can be an expert on something, but you also have to be a jack of all trades.
Right. Yeah. So adapt and evolve. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Looking back on maybe the early part of your career, do you have a favorite project that you worked on, like number one, or
wow,
are they all great?
They're all great. I think some of the international projects I worked on, I really enjoyed some of the core work that I did. I was actually project leader on a project in the Nile Delta, and I went over to Egypt and examined cores for a couple weeks straight. Came back and brought samples back, and then our team developed a brand new stratigraphic model for our properties up in the Nile Delta, and that was exciting. Although our technical committee meeting with our partners was 2 weeks later. So I pulled a lot of all-nighters in those 2 weeks to try to pull the project together and then fly back to Cairo. After I'd flown to Cairo to look at the cores, brought samples back, put the report together, and flew back to present it to our partners.
Wow.
And I think the other one that I really enjoyed was the first time the first big 3D survey that Marathon ever took was offshore Indonesia in the Tuna Sea. It was 100 square miles. And I did the seismic interpretation on that and developed a seismic stratigraphic model for offshore in a lacustrine system.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of exciting to work, first of all, with 3D seismic for the first time ever, and to do both the stratigraphic, and also there was a lot of complicated faulting. So we had to set up some kind of system where you could see faults dipping in different directions and faults moving various amounts, a lot of scissoring faults. So we had a blue, red, black, white sun to illuminate the fault planes to show which way they were dipping. So that was a kind of a brand new thing that we were working on.
Okay, so taking different directions, light directions to illuminate.
Yep. Because otherwise you couldn't understand what the faults were doing. What was the direction of slippage and which way were the fault planes dipping?
Gotcha. Interesting. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. So, and we've gone through kind of the early part of your career. How did you transition into an affiliate faculty member at Colorado School of Mines? If you don't mind going through that.
So my advisor, John Wormy, was at Rice, and my last year, he moved on to Colorado School of Mines as a professor. He asked me if I wanted to come up to Mines. I said, no, they're just going to find some kind of deficiencies in my coursework, which they probably would maybe take some engineering class. So I stayed on at Rice. But when I came up to Denver, John said to me, hey, would you come and give a guest lecture in my class? Which I did. But as soon as a professor finds out that you're available to give talks, then they don't have to do any kind of planning for that day. So I started giving talks for a lot of different professors at Mines, starting in the early 80s. And about 5 or 6 years ago, Steve Sonnenberg said to me, why aren't you an affiliate faculty? And I said, what's an affiliate faculty? He says, everything you've been doing. So for a couple of decades, I'd already been doing, or longer than that, 3 decades, I'd been giving guest lectures, sitting on thesis and dissertation committees, going on field trips with students, usually being the one that had to buy the beer. And because I had, a company was sending me, and I really liked working with the students. So when Steve said, well, essentially what you've been doing, that's what affiliate faculty is. You can say you're affiliated with School of Mines. We can say we have this expertise from industry.
Gotcha.
So
Win-win.
So that's about 5 or maybe 6 years ago now. I became an affiliate faculty. So I still sit on committees, student committees, still give guest lectures, and still go out in the field with students.
That's fantastic. And when you look back over the length of your career, I mean, if you could think of a good mentor, or what makes a good mentor, or somebody that stands out in your mind as a positive career mentor for kind of getting through the tough times, right?
Yeah, it's hard to pin down just one. I would say that my professors, especially my primary professor I did a senior thesis with, Helen Hay at Earlham, Ron Perkins, my prof at Duke, and John Warming, my prof at Rice, were all great mentors. They really pushed me as well as supported me. And then also I've had my very first boss at Marathon, Rich Evans, was very open to projects I was working on. And then my last boss at EOG, Lauren Leiker, who was a senior executive VP, was also a great geologist and really wanted the bottom line answers, but was willing to spend the money on doing the science to find out those answers. And he loved a good geologic argument. So he's one of the sharpest geologists I ever met. And I think, so he would be my last mentor. So really, it's not just one mentor. And I think that's true for most geoscientists. It's along the way. Who do you surround yourselves? Who do you gravitate toward? I tried to gravitate toward geologists that would push me intellectually, challenge me, but also support me.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. Awesome. That's really good advice for those of us out there. What keeps you fascinated about geology? What keeps you in the game?
Yeah. I always tell students, geology is like a detective fiction novel. You look at different clues and you're trying to piece them together to come up with an answer. And I guess I just love the challenge of piecing together those clues. And that's what's really kept me. And all my projects, I've worked, like I said, worldwide. Every project is so different, but in some ways they build on each other. So you use your expertise, and that helps me understand the clues I'm putting together. I would say the other thing that really keeps me excited is actually working with some of the younger geologists, like at Colorado School of Mines. They keep you young, they keep you challenged.
Yeah.
So I've really enjoyed working with the students.
Yeah, the enthusiasm that students bring is invigorating, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
They're naive and wide-eyed, but very enthusiastic.
Yeah, that's great. And so for your talk on the 20th, what can we expect? Who's the why should people attend your talks? I don't know.
But I think there's been a real issue for the last 30, 40 years on what is the Wall Creek, what is the Turner and the Powder River Basin. Obviously, two major hydrocarbon reservoirs. What controls their distribution? Why do we have these two units? What do their names even mean? People talk about them being correlative. Are they really correlative or not? And so I think what I'm trying to do is make a very broad brushed interpretation of what the Wall Creek is relative to what the Turner is across the basin. And then obviously how that would play into how you would map them out and then drill for hydrocarbons. How would you produce these units? So
Fantastic.
I think I and my co-authors, Keith Shanley and Dave Ritchie, are kind of putting together really a working model. It's not a finalized model by any means, but it's really trying to understand the distribution of these rocks. And it's an ongoing project, and it's a fascinating system. So that's, people hopefully will be fascinated by the model that we come up with.
That's I'm already excited about it. So and thank you so much for being here today, for volunteering to be a presenter. And it's an honor to chat with you today. So, and as I said earlier, it's Just Talk is December 20th. That's Tuesday of next week. And that's at the Rock Bottom in downtown Denver. You can go to rmssepm.org to register or learn more about the talk. You can come join us in person. You can join via Zoom. Either way, but just make sure you don't miss it. So again, thanks a lot, Jeff, and I really appreciate it. And it was really fun talking to you.
Well, thanks. And thank you, Rocky Mountain Section SEPM, for asking me to do this talk. It's an extension of our short little 17-minute talk that we gave for the Powder River Basin Symposium. So this is a much more expanded and much more thorough treatment. So again, thanks for inviting me to give it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.